We'd been in discussions with the BBC for a while about doing some Shakespeare films, and it just seemed to us that these particular plays, these 4, taken as a run, would be a really exciting thing to do, particularly for 2012, because they say so much about Britain and about the history of this country.
Shakespeare is like this Olympic torch that gets passed from generation to generation, and every generation of actors is allowed to reinvent these astonishing parts.
As a serving of 4 plays, it's a very, very smart choice because it documents history, but it documents it through Shakespeare's retelling of history. They're 4 of his best, put it that way.
Shakespeare on screen is something different. It's a really great first entry into Shakespeare as well, because people are brought up on screen more, and you can tell the story probably more economically in a way, and perhaps a little more clearly than you can in the theatre.
From the beginning, we wanted to go for the very, very best directors who are working at the moment in the UK. Rupert is renowned for his theatre work and not yet for his screen work. Richard Eyre is obviously famous both on stage and on screen. And Thea, we felt it was very important to work with someone who was coming fresh to Henry V, and how much more fresh to have a woman directing Henry V.
I think this might be a tremendous introduction to people who've not seen Shakespeare before.
For me, it's a sense of history. The continuity of thinking that we're working on stories that were written nearly 500 years ago, and you think that actually Shakespeare could well have been walking within a few hundred yards of that room 500 years ago or so. That's very exciting.
It's very, very exciting and very appropriate that Shakespeare has been put at the heart of the Cultural Olympiad. I mean, Shakespeare is the great British literary and theatrical legacy. And this is a great, great inheritance.
The fact that these 4 plays are being done by the BBC in this Olympic year, I think makes them slightly iconic. And that was one reason I wanted to be part of it. I felt this was something we should be proud of. We do drama well, we do Shakespeare well.
A lot of actors would love to do Shakespeare, but most of the opportunities are on stage, and that means committing to a long run. So to be able to say to people, you can come in and do 4 weeks with us, and that's your Shakespeare, it was very attractive.
It's very rare to get the opportunity to do a Shakespeare play on film. I think the histories are amazing, but they're not perhaps as accessible now as a comedy like Much Ado About Nothing is, for example. So maybe people have to work a little bit harder at it, but I think that's exciting. It's nice to have to work a bit hard, and then and it's rewarded once you stick with something.
I think so many people are put off Shakespeare at school, and like so much of drama, you have to see it in order to be moved by it, and then you go back to the text and you begin to understand the world, the imagination behind those words.
The classroom setting is probably, in my opinion, the worst place to come to Shakespeare first. Because Shakespeare never intended his work to be read in a classroom. He intended his work to be heard and to be seen.
I hope what makes these films accessible and immediate to a contemporary audience is I think we have, for the first time, spoken it very differently. Spoken with a fluency and an ease, a very sort of off-the-cuff spontaneity that I think is immediately accessible to the ear. Shakespeare is at its best when you speak it like you're making it up, when it sounds as if it was written yesterday.
You've got to speak the language not in a stilted, isn't the verse beautiful kind of way. It's got to be the way you talk. And people will kind of get it by the way you own it. I think that's what happens. The actors have to own the stuff as if it's absolutely the way they speak, and that's it.
And the great thing about the screen is that words are quite spare. Don't use words very much in our movies. So the great thing about bringing these 2 things together, the great wordsmith Shakespeare and this great medium, the camera, show me, show me, show me, don't tell me, is that you get this fantastic mix of beautiful, powerful words said in a way that is almost throwaway. And the visuals, the emotions in somebody's eyes. Shakespeare suddenly becomes, boom, 3-dimensional, really colourful, instead of this dry, black and white mark on a page.
You can tell a lot of backstory with a look or with a very small gesture, which was really lovely. I think that was one of the really joyful things about doing it on film. You could fill in all those gaps.
Film does give you an immense freedom that you don't have on stage, to get in close to the characters.
The difference between doing Shakespeare on screen and on stage is exactly the same as doing the difference between doing anything on stage and on screen. Your audience is there.
I was confident from the beginning that it was going to work, but I mean, there were many times on set where you just sat back and it was like being, in the best seat at the theatre.
They're completely different to the most of the kind of telly that's out at the moment, right? So that's one thing. I think it's going to be a shock. And I think in some ways you're going to see visuals that feel like film and recognisable, and we understand what this is. But then they're speaking Shakespeare, and that's going to be a shock. And obviously what I hope is that we've managed to put these things together. It's like the modern with the period together in such a way that it's enticing and exciting, and you don't quite understand it, but you want to understand it. It's appealing.
We wanted to give each director as much freedom as possible within their own film so that they could choose their own teams. We weren't imposing people on them, but then to be able to link the films together so that as an audience you can watch from start to finish and it feels like a cohesive whole. All the directors have bought into the fact that this is part of a bigger picture, and Thea has been out on set to see what Rupert was filming on Richard II so that she could get a sense of his approach. And, we've been cross-casting across Henry IV and Henry V, which meant that Thea and Richard have been working together on that. So I think it's a very satisfying blend, the whole lot working together as a cohesive serial.
The directors sort of came together in wanting to make the plays in their own time. 14th century for Richard II and 15th century for Henry IV and Henry V. So that set a boundary as to how we had to approach the season of plays.
One of the things I'm very sort of passionate about is Shakespeare spoken in real environments. The actors become less rhetorical, less theatrical, but also the language has it engages with English identity, and what makes us Britons up now. A big part of it is our language and a big part is our landscape, and the two sort of come together very powerfully.
We knew we needed the coast, we knew we needed beaches, we knew we needed an environment for the Palace of Westminster, we needed castles, and we knew we needed unspoilt countryside, but not only unspoilt, it needed to feel believable for its period.
These incredibly beautiful oak forestries that fall into fenceways and stone walls, and it is breathtaking.
The thing about these environments is that they have to feel right. There has to be a belief in them that makes the actors sure of where they are and to make the camera sure of where it is. And if you can find those environments, we stand a chance of making the language feel at home there. We found a Palace of Westminster at St David's Cathedral, which hadn't been used before for a major drama, so that was a bit of a coup, and the cathedral authorities and the dean were amazing. When the cast walked on, they felt they were there, and that always helps the performance.
I remember those days in St David's, particularly the deposition scene with Ben, as being quite special. I felt like there was some magic in the air on those days.
We were in a sacred space, and whatever you believe in, it brings about a certain degree of respectfulness amongst people, which is beautiful, I think, So we respected that we had to be quiet and respect the space and the age of that space and so forth.
So I think all the decisions that the directors made about how to stage it, where to stage it, have rung true in terms of the material.
I think one of the reasons we're so attracted still to Shakespeare is partly because he has a brilliant command of so many different worlds. In the plays, it's very filmic. You dip into an East End pub, then you go to the Palace of Westminster, then you go to a castle in Northumbria, then you go back to the pub, then you go to a robbery, then you go to a castle in Wales. But the reason we go on loving Shakespeare is because he has this sort of filmic technique of pulling all these different worlds, different strands of stories together, but also because the people he writes are so human. They're so vulnerable. Even the kings, they're human beings with their frailties and strengths and mortality.
Lord, how this world is given to lying.
It's like we keep rediscovering him. And why we keep rediscovering him is because he is so multifaceted. He's not a two-dimensional playwright. He writes about what we see and he writes about what we don't see.
This was the first time that anybody had written plays about the whole breadth of English society. And they are dazzling. You know, so it's not just about kings, it's also about the poor men who were conscripted into the army as cannon fodder. It's about a drunk man who spends the whole of his life in a pub. It's about a prostitute, and it's about princes. And nobody had ever done something like that before the 1590s, and very few people have done it since.
For whatever reason, wherever he came from, however he got to it, he seemed to touch the English consciousness in a way that few playwrights have done since.
I always say that Shakespeare is the DNA of English-speaking drama. And it's our particular luck, being British, that we have that DNA in our culture.
He wrote his plays for everyone, for every echelon of society. And I think that not everyone gets to see Shakespeare now because it's been slightly hijacked by an elite. I don't think it's done on purpose, but it has been. It's been at universities, it's been in higher seats of learning, but it should be for everyone.
You know, we're saying that Shakespeare is accessible to all and should be understandable for everybody.
The reason Shakespeare has lasted so long is that they are completely relevant today. They're extraordinarily relevant.
I do hope that these are successful not only in entertaining people, which I think they should do because they're all great plays, but also in really highlighting what Shakespeare can do, which is make you look at your own life afresh and make you see the world in potentially a different way.
Shakespeare's tough. Shakespeare's tough, you know, and he also can be bad. We've got to admit that too, you know. Occasionally he can be really rubbish. But when he's good, he's very, 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 very good.
He does still work, he does still move us, he does still touch us.
That we are capable of greatness, we are capable of winning the Battle of Agincourt or of being great kings, whatever that means in our world. But we're also capable of jealousy and fear and greed and ambition and pride and grief and all of these things that basically make us human. And he manages to represent those feelings with very real characters in very extreme situations and absolutely heartbreaking poetry.